everybody, to episode 27 of Girl, How'd You Get That Gig? For
And the
Amy,
crowd goes wild.
the wave happens.
I have to do my own sound effects, so.
I love it. For Amy G, I'm Celeste Gehring, and so excited to have on a former Fox colleague of mine. She is fantastic. She's had many roles in the industry, and her current role is in the fast and furious lane of sports and tech. She has a very
Yeah.
impressive title. It's Client Success Global Accounts Director for for Sportradar, and one of the many women I know who's helping all of you other women get in through the doors, really get into sports and tech. So please welcome your friend of mine, Nicole Masterson.
Yay.
Hi there.
I just want to throw Fox in there because we worked at Fox together for so long, Nicole.
Like
So
Absolutely.
it
Yes.
is Sports Radar, everybody, which is
Yeah.
a very
Sportradar, yeah.
impressive company. So we're so excited to have you.
Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you so much for having me on. Happy to be here.
I know we're excited to find out about Sportradar. Because at first I was like, I wasn't familiar with it, and then as I dove in, I was. So I think a lot of people will be as well. So let's just start there with the company. What does Sportradar provide, and then will you talk about what you do with that really fancy title, Customer Success Director?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, Sportradar is the official data partner of many of the leagues, US and globally. Domestically here in the US, we have the NBA, WNBA, and all the basketball leagues affiliated with that, G League, etc., as well as Major League Baseball and the National Hockey League as well. So those are kind of the tentpole leagues that we support here in the US. It's when people always ask what I do and where I work, I always tell them as the credits roll out on the basketball game that you're watching or the MLB game that you're watching, there'll be a nice red sport, stats and data support provided by Sportradar. That nice logo pops up there at the end of the broadcast. So we are a sports and data tech company. We combine real-time stats along with standings, scores, schedules, all the sports metadata that thousands of our customers use to power their sports experience.
So when we were, because I was at Fox Sports too, Fox Sports Net,
Okay.
but I don't know if we crossed paths because I was, what was I, Celeste? 2001 to 2004.
Oh no, yeah, I wasn't there yet. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm old.
yeah.
I'm old. That's fine. And we use StatsInc, which is what you guys morphed into, right? Is that
No,
correct?
no, they're actually
Oh,
a
oh,
competitor
they're
of
your
ours.
competitor. Oh, I thought you
Yeah.
guys overtook them. But
No,
so
no, yeah.
that's how I started to understand when we were researching you, because when we were putting together features at Fox Sports Net and you needed stats, we literally would write into, we had StatsInc at the time. This is 25 years ago. But it was so helpful, so helpful to not have to dig and do all that. There's just people there that provide this information for you to help enhance your story. And my husband is a sports reporter at ESPN, and they have a stat service as well. And so it's just uber helpful. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, the broadcast support and research support is super important to getting sports on the air and to providing context for storylines.
Yes.
To help inform viewers. My husband works at Fox Sports still and is the head MLB researcher for them. And, he uses all kinds of tools to get that kind of information on, daily in his job.
Daily. And they're getting asked stuff all the time. And I just think it's funny, just FYI, we're going to dispel the myth for the people who love these broadcast teams. They do not pull this stuff out of thin air. They get help. They get help. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. There's people behind the scenes there to help,
Yes.
Ensure that they're having great broadcasts, and stats and insights are one of the many ways that they do that. Yeah.
And it's so great because all three of us have spouses that are in the industry. So that's really exciting for
be
this
another
podcast
show
as well, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about you growing up, Nicole, being from Arizona. Did you play sports? How did you get into sports?
Yeah, so I have always loved sports. One of my jokes is that, our Thanksgiving times are always centered around when games would be on TV, and it kind of ran our schedule as a kid. My dad is from New Jersey, and so He's a massive New York Jets fan. So now we all are sad New York Jets fans,
I know.
recently, especially. But
I was just
so
gonna say, I'm sorry.
yeah, I know. I get that reaction a lot. Hopefully, maybe one day they'll kind of turn that around. But sports have always been a huge part of my life from a viewing perspective. And then growing up, I played softball, basketball, volleyball, anything really with a ball that I could get my hands on. I played that. I played throughout high school. But my love of sports is really football. We joke my husband's first love is baseball. My first love is football. So it has always been part of our lives. And eventually, you feel so blessed and thankful to be able to be in a career where you enjoy what you're doing every single day because you are in the industry that you love to just be part of as a fan as well.
Oh, I love to hear that because we've had conversations just about, and we can get into it a little bit later too, like how you kind of balance being a fan when you have to work in sports too. Cause a lot of times it can crush fandom, when you like, and a lot of times that's when you're working for a team or you work with an athlete that you thought was great and you get to meet them and you're like, oh, maybe not. But I love that you have this passion and that you're working in it. Cause that's kind of the whole MO of this show is like follow what you love and you'll enjoy going to work every day. If we roll the tape back a little bit on you, you have a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Arizona.
Yep.
Why that school and why that major?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always interested in writing and, not so much creative writing, but reporting. Growing up on ESPN or Fox, you would see all these sideline reporters, and that part was so interesting to me because it was a visual representation of women in sports, right? At that time when I was growing up, you didn't really see a lot of women in sports, especially, in front of a camera. So that was the only avenue of what you would find. There were some groundbreaking pioneers and female reporters, from like a written side. But if you wanted to be a female in sports, your only visual representation of that was the sideline reporter. And so that, I really liked writing. I loved sports. And so I went to go be a journalism major. And I remember at one of my internships when I was in college, they said, okay, you'll spend 1 week in the sports department. The next week you'll go to breaking news. Then you'll go to, writing scripts and all this stuff at a local TV station in Phoenix. And I said, no, I'm going to spend the summer in the sports department. And I don't really have an interest in local news or breaking news or any of that stuff. I just want to be with the sports guys. So very early on, I knew that that's where I wanted to go. And when I was in college, I was a member of the Arizona Daily Wildcat, which was the student-run newspaper. I was running box scores for the local newspaper in Tucson as well. So it was a place where you were able to be a big fish in the small pond. The U of A Journalism School is not necessarily known for its sports journalism prowess, but a lot of the opportunities were there. And for me, it was better to be at a school that I knew I wanted to go at, rather than be at a place that I knew had a great reputation necessarily for sports journalism. I was going to make my own way and be happy where I was rather than trying to compete with everybody else who wanted to do the exact same thing.
Really smart strategy. And, Amy and I talk about this all the time. This is one of the reasons why we started this podcast, is because when we were growing up too, there were only women in front of the camera, and that's really all that you knew was out there. And now we're talking to so many amazing women, week after week, who are just doing incredible things in all different areas. We're actually going to have on a golf artist in a couple of months too, and she's fabulous. So there's all these careers too that are sports adjacent, right? That we're calling them now. So, and most of the women we're talking to as well that have been ballers have had internships in college and taken advantage of every situation. So what internships did you have during school?
Yeah, so I worked at a couple different places while I was at school, not only locally. So in Phoenix, I spent one summer at Fox 10 News in Phoenix, which is the local Fox affiliate there, working with their sports department. I interned at CBS Sports in New York. So I got to move to New York for a summer, which was really cool. And I did as much as possible to get as much experience as I could. While people were doing, study abroad programs and going to Europe or Asia or South America for the summer, I didn't do any of that. I stayed home and tried to get work experience, not only while I was at school, but take advantage of it during the summers as well. Writing for the local Tucson newspaper was another thing that I did during school as well for them. So I've started in journalism in like written, in print, and then I eventually transitioned over to broadcast when it was very clear that that's where the industry was going, was more toward TV, internet. Twitter became a thing while I was in college. So having that shift really prompted that shift of my own as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, all the things that you're saying sounds like you were on the track to be a beat writer of sorts, or a
Yep.
columnist, a sports columnist. So, with that, how did you make the shift? And maybe you could take us like through your job timeline, I like to call it.
Yeah.
So, first job after you graduated, and what ensued after to your current role at Sport
Yeah.
Radar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was covering various different sports at U of A for the local newspaper. So I covered the U of A men's basketball team, I covered the softball team, I covered the football team. And you would go to practices on the daily and you would, write. I was writing probably 6 articles a week for the newspaper at that point, including game recaps, game previews, columns if needed or warranted to go along with that support. But that was all, during school. And at that time, I still wanted to be an actual writer. When the shift happened into broadcast was when I kind of realized like it's going to be a much narrower focus to be a beat writer, right? There's only so many teams, there's only so many positions at these media companies. A lot of it is based on your experience. It would be hard to break into that industry without having a lot of experience. And even though I had a ton of experience,
Yeah, it
I
sounds
saw
like it.
more opportunity in the broadcast world. And that's really what I shifted into, and shifted my focus from written journalism to broadcast journalism, even in classes and things like that. So learning how to write scripts, learning how to work with talent on air. If you weren't going to be the talent on air, you had to learn how to do everything else, behind the camera. And it served me well because my internships then opened up to broadcast. Like I said, Fox in Phoenix, and then in CBS was also on the broadcast side. And those led to more broadcast support opportunities. I've worked, the NCAA tournament for Turner and CBS, and I've worked, gymnastics meets for ESPN, and all kinds of random stuff that would pop up. That someone would say, "Hey, we need a PA," and I would go, "Great, here I am."
Yep.
That's really how the resume started to build. And once I had completed my internship in New York, my goal was to go back there immediately after I graduated college. That was the plan. The plan was to go back to CBS and to start working in New York and work my way up through that. And, in applying for jobs, there was one at NFL Network for a features production assistant, which was a nice combo of storytelling, which is what I love so much about the written journalism, and broadcast, because it's NFL Network. And so I threw my hat in the ring over there, and I got a recommendation from a former, the person that I had worked at CBS, and NFL Network called, and I ended up out in LA. I had 6 days to move to Los Angeles and find an apartment. It was a very quick transition from, yeah, I'm going back to New York, to just kidding, I'm moving to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I've been in LA ever since. It was something that I thought was going to be temporary, and I'll work there for a season and then come back to Arizona and reevaluate. And it's funny how things work out sometimes. When I finished my one season at NFL Network, they do things or at the time they did things on a 7-month basis, right? So you would start in August when football season would start, and you would end in March after the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And when that ended, I was like, okay, well, I'll stick around here, see if I can pick up some odd jobs, which I did. And then Fox Sports 1 was launching. And at that time, lots of people were moving to LA to be part of that launch of that network. And I applied there for a associate producer position. I was designing graphics for what they used to call the wing and ticker, which is like the L-shaped graphic on the side. I worked on a show called Crowd Goes Wild with Regis Philbin and Katie Nolan and Michael Costa, who's like a comedian slash former tennis player. I worked on that show for a while. It was a very interesting shift from being, a features production assistant where I was cutting B-roll and writing scripts and helping produce, opens to the Super Bowl, to being like, oh, I'm gonna graphics produce over here. And I think part of the journey that I've been on is always just being open to what the next thing is, and saying, I haven't really picked a career defined path, but I've picked a career theme, if you will. And it's been in sports. And I think that's served me well because it's allowed me to be adaptable to what happens next. And what happened next was that Celeste said, hey, you work near us. You seem like a hard worker. Why don't you come over here and join my team? And I said, absolutely. And I was at the assignment desk with her for a couple months. And that was a great transition for me as well, because it opened up even more behind the scenes stuff. You're coordinating feeds, you're gathering post-game content for live broadcast, collaborating with vendors and organizing logistics and getting into the stuff that, your average sports fan doesn't even consider. And that really opened up what I like the next phase of my career. So forever grateful, Celeste. Thank you.
Well, you've always been amazing to work with, and just always been so strategic. Ever since I've known you, you're like, here's my next thing, here's my next thing. And I love what you just said about always saying yes, because as women, we continue to do that our whole lives. We say, okay, when you're younger, always say yes. But I think all of us that have lasted in the industry have looked at newer things and said, okay, what else can we say yes to? And what is the newest thing that we can do? So, you've never really been a stranger to tech, working with graphics and working on the assignment decks where we were always dealing with technology. But moving over into Sportradar, you are truly dealing with tech now. What has been that challenge and that difference for you in a total tech company?
Yeah, so you have to learn a lot about how things work behind the scenes, and things that are automated processes, and efficiency and coding, and things that are nowhere near a journalism major. But I'm slowly gathering that tribal knowledge and trying to act as the Rosetta Stone between the customer or the client and the company, right? These are our best practices. This is how you should integrate this. If you want to get the most out of what you're contracted for, here's a better way to do it. You kind of act as an intake of information from the client, and then you also, spit out information from the company to the client. So you really are that translation piece in the middle. Tech is something that is so growing in so many sectors, especially sports, next gen stats, StatCast, all the AI that's now being sprinkled into everything. It truly has changed the game in the sports world, and will continue to, because of how innovative it is and what it allows these companies to do and present to fans.
So I want to dive a little more into what you do, because if somebody's watching and they're into tech and sports and they're hearing from you and they're like, well, I want to do what she does, like just in layman's terms, because tech and Amy G don't go together too well. I'll tell you that right now. Like I always joke, science and tech was on that side of the campus at Davis, and communications was over here. We did not interact. But there's this customer part of this as well. So you have like this writing background and a graphics background. You pretty much touched on like almost every job in the sports industry. How do those integrate into what you do, and what is the customer side of this, like interaction with people? Because that is
Yep.
not a whole lot of broadcast, right? We have interaction with athletes. And in my role, I had to have interaction with fans, but not customers. So where does that part come in?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of account management, right? Where you're
Mhm.
looking at the account and saying, okay, this is what they're contracted for. How do we help them have the best experience possible? And that really is the guiding light. You know, we need to make sure that we're client centric, that we're thinking about what works for the customer, thinking about how our roadmaps and what we plan to develop aligns with what the customer needs. And then you're brokering a lot of those communications and a lot of those conversations between what a big tech customer might want and desire and where they want to go and what you're able to provide them and how you're able to provide it, the timelines that you're able to provide it. It's still a lot of organizational, still a lot of behind the scenes, but it's also then relaying that information, providing updates directly to these tech companies, working with engineers, working with product managers, working with heads of product, working with business development. It touches on all the pieces to create a holistic experience, and that's really what the goal is, to make sure that we are providing the best experience possible for the client and for the customer, because we want to make, you know, what we do fun, consumable, enjoyable. We want to make sure that it translates to the fan at the end of the day.
You've been promoted a lot in your career as well. And you can tell us, is there like a job you didn't really like? And if so,
Just
you know,
us.
what was, you
No
know,
one else is
maybe,
going to hear.
right? Yeah. And, you know, maybe some of us have had jobs we don't like either, but what was the key for you to really thrive in that job and still use your, you know, strategic hat, if you will, to say, okay, this is what's best for me until I move into a role that I really want?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think COVID was a time where we all had to reevaluate everything, right? In terms of, you know, the situations we were in, the situations we were handed. We didn't have a lot of control over the industry at that time. When games stopped happening, a lot of companies went through, unfortunately, a lot of layoffs and cost reductions and all that. And, you know, sometimes you're the unintended victim of some of those things. So in July of 2020, I found myself without a job anymore. And so I had to start to pivot. And my first thought was, okay, there are no sports, or actually MLB had just come back in the bubble. It was
Yeah.
like the day that MLB come back.
August. Yeah.
Yeah. The day that MLB came back was the day I got laid off. So
Oh,
it was, yeah, it was, you know, being laid off is never fun, but in
no.
the end, you can look back and it's given me different perspective, which, you know, again, you're grateful for all the bumps along the way because it's part of your journey. And it makes you appreciative for the, you know, for the great position that you are in at the end of the day. And
Awesome.
when I had to pivot from that, my first thought was, where am I going to go in an industry that's going to be booming in this time when we don't have a lot of sports going on? And that was the time where FanDuel and DraftKings and all the daily fantasy operators were really starting to pick up some momentum. You were getting legal approval in different states. And so I actually dipped my toe in the sports betting world for a while, over at FanDuel. And I think I had a different idea of what that job was going to be compared to what it actually was. And I eventually, after a couple months, thought to myself, okay, this is not what I want to do, but I want to pivot it to something else within this company. And I think that is the foot in the door, as cliche as it sounds, really means so much. Because once you're in the door, you have all these internal resources that you can really leverage, right? You can ask someone to be a mentor. You can ask someone 15 minutes for coffee to just kind of pepper them with some questions about what they did in their career. You can go talk to your HR rep and say, hey, you know, I'm thinking about what I'd like to do next. Do you have advice? Or how does this work for this selection job? Or, just to find out that kind of insider information once you're in, that you certainly don't get from the outside, right? It's much easier to move within a company than it is to try and leave the company and go somewhere else, especially if your network isn't as robust, right? So I think once I realized that, I'm doing this job, but I don't love this job, I started to think about where I could go next. And that was what really kept me going until I found something that I did like was, hey, this is what I have to do right now to keep the lights on, but what can I start to do in my peripheral that will set me up for where I want to go next? And the ability to kind of think about that, I think, is scary sometimes, because you don't lose the love for what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but that you're kind of putting a bookmark, and you're like, all right, we're not going back, right? We're not gonna go this way. We're gonna turn the page to a new chapter. And that's ultimately what I knew I wanted to do, and what I did.
There's so much fearlessness to you. Like, you're like, yeah, I'm going to try this. I'm going to dip my toe over here and I'm going to try that. I love it. I love that. It's just so inspiring. All right, let's chat about women in tech.
Yes.
What can you reveal to us regarding how many there are, the talent pool? Is it male dominated? Has there been progress? What can you share?
Yeah. So women in tech is interesting because I feel like we're in this wave where it's starting to, STEM programs at a young age are getting girls interested in these kind of technology fields a lot earlier, right? When I was in school, you had computers twice a week, and everyone knows how to use the internet now, right? So there's a much higher base level. But I think the tide is starting to turn. It's certainly male dominated, but so is sports, right? So maybe that's why it's never bothered me, because I know that, I can countless meetings where I was the only woman in the room, countless. And that's okay. Like, I've always kind of thrived in being uncomfortable. Like, if you want to do it and you have the passion to do it, that shouldn't be the thing that stops you, right? There should be no reason that is lesser. It's something where the trailblazing part of it is never what I've thought. I've never attributed that quality. But when you look back and you go, I was the only girl on that team for 4 years, and I had a great impact. And you don't think about it when you're in it, but when you look back, you can kind of see that path. And women in tech is something that I'm part at Sportradar. We have a US group, we have a global group, and it's all dedicated to not only making the company a better place to work for women, and it's supported by allies. So there are men who are part of the group as well, because they participate in events and show their support, which is great. But it really strives to get younger women involved in the industry and show them, like, you can be a programmer. You don't have to go into a traditional woman's role. You can be a data entry specialist, or a data scientist, or all these other things that lead with a technology forward title. And I think it's always exciting to see more women. I mean, I certainly see more women in the industry now than ever before. It's great to see. I think our perspectives also help enrich the game and the sport, and the more women that can be involved and feel like they are represented in the sport, the better. Why would you want to exclude? Why would you want to exclude people who are passionate about something? It's
so true.
Yeah.
I love what you're like, the perspective enriches, right? Like, our perspective is different, but it's enriching. It adds. I love it. I love you. I've decided. I love her. I love her.
Right. Well, it's interesting because tech is moving so fast, right, Nicole? So everything that I was studying and I was researching was talking about that there was a really limited pool of women that were going into tech. So I liked what you said about the STEM and how younger women are getting more involved, Because the question is, should more women get involved because they'll have more opportunities, right? Or, how can they get in there even more, right? Is that a good major for them?
Oh, I think it absolutely is, because, there's, when you talk about data and coding and all that kind of stuff, it's not based on any gendered ability, right? It's based on your,
Totally.
yeah, you understand Java, you understand Python, you understand the same, it's numbers, right? It's numbers that equate to values at the end of the day. And I think the trend is shifting. I think engineers are now starting, to, you see some women, you see, we have certainly data scientists in our company that are female. We have, lots of emphasis placed on how do you find the best candidate regardless of where they live, regardless of if they're male, female, regardless of, what background they may have. If they're good at their job and they can perform the duties asked at a high level, that should be all the requirements needed. It shouldn't
100%.
go beyond anything other than that. I think the more women that get into the industry, the less the perception will be that it's all men. And I think that's a good thing. I think, we have as women so much to give to this sports industry, and we're just starting to see the potential of what that is.
I know. It really does feel like we're like on the very cusp of like just blowing up, with owning the world.
Yeah.
As we should. As we should. It's so true though, Nicole. It's like I get the argument for physical differences in gender and jobs that require a certain amount of physical strength or speed or, whatever. I understand that argument that if physically a female can't perform this position, then she probably shouldn't be doing it, because a lot of times it's, in a firefighting world or police world where like people's lives are at stake. Like, so I can wrap my head around that, but I've never been able to wrap my head around mental equality and a job that it's just like, I'm just as smart as you. So,
Yeah.
or whatever that is, even covering baseball, like I always laugh at, and I married a writer, but I'm like, you didn't make it to the big leagues either. So the whole argument of like, well, you've never played at this level. Well, I played at a collegiate level, which is a lot more than this guy who's eating his Doritos and has crumbs all over his computer and, made sure he hit the press dining 3 times during the game, and that's a stereotype, but it's definitely there for a reason. So I'm just so glad what you're saying is so refreshing. What I want to get into though is another stereotype and a stigma of stats analytics. So that can come across as a little boring at times for people. What is your reaction to that? And what do you find exciting about tech and sports?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things about stats. When you look at the numbers, sometimes you go, okay, it's just a number. What does that mean? We can rank players, we can rank teams. So does the number always tell the story? And I think the answer to that is no. I think that's why there's so many people around the broadcast space specifically, and writers that provide context, right? Okay, you're looking at a number. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it average? What does it mean? Is it unprecedented? Is it historical? Is it something that, has to give a lot of historical significance or team significance? Is it significant for that specific player? All these storylines that make sports great at the end of the day are all based on a statistic. It's just tell it, right? It's how you wrap your mind around it, and it's how you put it in the context of that player, that team, that franchise, that league. And the ability to build, it's like a building blocks, right? You build the numbers to tell the story, you provide the context to give the fans, additional information. And anybody can sit there and watch a, 70-yard touchdown run. But did you know that that's the first 70-yard touchdown run that this franchise has had? in 25 years, and
Right.
that it
The
broke.
significance just went of
Yeah,
that moment because of the stat. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's cool because it gives you that basis, and then everything else builds off those numbers. As far as technology and where sports is going, I mean, it's you see so many companies now that are very, very interested in getting into the sports tech world, because it's like, are we going to be watching sports through glasses? Are we going to be, able to project sports on our watches one day and, have a hologram? It can go so many directions, and so many companies are putting their hat in the ring with sports. Netflix just acquired a Christmas game. A lot.
Yep, I read about that.
Yeah, a lot of these other tech companies want a piece of the action for sure,
Yeah.
because sports is the last appointment viewing television. Everything else you can watch, you can
Whenever
stream
you
it,
want.
download at your leisure. But that football game starts at 10 a.m. on Sundays, if you're on the West Coast, and you miss kick,
You missed it.
you missed it.
Yeah.
And sales talks about that in every network that I've ever been a part of, or every meeting I've been a part of, is sports sells for that reason, is because it's the only thing that's live anymore. But I have one more question before our last question for you as we wrap this up. One of the things I thought was so amazing when you were talking was how lucky Sportradar is to have you, because you've done a little bit of everything. You've done production, you've done writing, you've done all these different things. And to be able to sit down with a client and put that into context, right? Like you were talking about with the information that Sportradar has, being able to put that into historical context, or being able to change the whole entire story of the game. I think it's just amazing, because there's so many women, I think, that are great translators in the industry. And, I think if there's young women that are watching this and they're like, I love to communicate, I like to disseminate information and talk to the engineers and talk to them about tech, I love to disseminate information and talk to, the consumer and what they're going to get. How grateful are those, clients that you have, because you can speak every single language that's needed for them to truly understand like the value they're getting.
Yeah, I think it's one of the skills that like inherently a lot of women have, right? The ability to talk to people, the ability to say like, oh, to be curious, to ask questions, to provide answers. I think those communication skills, I mean, I went to, my major was journalism and my minor was communication. So I know how to do a question and answer, session based off that. But it's something that the more people you talk to, you kind of learn how to guide conversations and how to use the information that you're hearing, and not only hear the information, process it, and then ask a question back. And I think that's something that takes like skill to develop, right? That's a soft skill that you can practice. You can practice, listening to a podcast and going, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about X, or tell me more about Y. And really using the listening, the comprehension, and then the famous, what I'm hearing from you is, and then repeat it back so that everybody's on the same page, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the goal, for everybody to have the agreement level.
Yeah.
That
We need to be on the same page. Yeah. Listening to me is the number one skill for anyone in any industry. If you are able to listen, you're going to go places, because so many people don't do it, and they're just talking and not processing and not shutting down to hear. And that's in business and work and relationships and marriages, with parenting. Like, you have to be able to listen. It's huge. Our final question is always the same question for our guests. So it's, what's your mantra or best piece of life advice that you live by?
One that's always stuck with me, and it's definitely not a mantra, but it's, shoot for the moon, and if you fail, you'll still land among the stars. I like that, because it's like, you can try your hardest, and if you tried your hardest at something but still failed, or it wasn't good enough for somebody else, like, at the end of the day, I can live with that. If I know that I gave 150%, and it still wasn't good enough, at least I put myself out there and at least I tried. I did as much as was in my control, right? And that's what I think at the end of the day, if you can look in the mirror and say, yeah, I did my best, I gave it everything, and maybe it didn't work out exactly what I wanted to do, but it either worked out in a way that I hadn't thought of, or, you know, I am satisfied with my own effort. That's about all you can do. I mean, it's a crazy world, it's a crazy job market, it's a crazy situation where, you know, you have to put yourself out there, you have to try, because you're never going to get anywhere if you're sitting on the sidelines. You have to just go for it, because you don't know where it's going to end up. You don't know that one can
I was
change
gonna say that translates to like outside of work, to everything in life. I mean, I would say I had that mantra or thought at the gym today. I shot for the moon on that damn rower, but I only landed amongst the stars. I did not hit the goal that my trainer was yelling at me to hit, but I'm like, I did my best. I'm very happy with myself. I can't breathe.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, you know, you went, you did it. Maybe your motivation wasn't there that day, or maybe you just weren't feeling it or whatever, but you know what? You put your best effort forward, and that's always to be commendable.
What you can do.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so
Absolutely.
awesome.
You
Yay,
are. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to do this too. So we know that you're fresh off a flight of seeing clients. So really, really appreciate your time and invaluable information for those listening. And I hope that this really opens up eyes to sport tech, sports and tech at Sportradar, and getting young girls involved, because it's pretty cool and it is thriving.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, the more we go down the road, the better it will be. So
absolutely, that's been everything.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
She is the real deal. There were so many nuggets of gold there, Amy. I'm going to be so excited about what teases you pick. What sound bites you pick for those teases.
I've got them down. They will, because she was so eloquent and succinct in her messaging. You know, so it was pretty easy. Like, she made it easy on me to pick out the teases, because I was like, yep, there it is. Nugget.
Nice.
Gold.
Nice. Awesome. All right.
I love that it's in a really different avenue than we've discussed before. So
Absolutely.
I really am walking away feeling like I learned a lot from Nicole.
Me too. Me too.
Good.
All right. Who are we learning a lot from for episode 28? Who's going to be on?
This one is going to be sweet. Emmy award-winning, Peabody award-winning sports reporter for ESPN, and now she's a podcast host of Good Game with Sarah Spain on the Women's Sports Audio Network. Sarah Spain is going to join us. She is very well known, and I was really excited when she said yes to coming on. So it's going to be a good one.
Yes, you got a good get with that one, Amy.
Yay.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please follow us on our social platforms. Help us grow our number. Our handle is @GirlGigPodcast.
And following us pays off, because we love to give swag away. So we randomly select winners from our Instagram account, again, @GirlGigPodcast. And we announce that lucky duck every few weeks. So the next one will be announced on August 28th. It's so simple to be entered to win. You just have to follow us on Instagram @GirlGigPodcast. And you need to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. It's Girl, How'd You Get That Gig? And it's free.
Nice. We're giving away some really good things.
Yeah, I think so.
If you love what you hear, make sure and share it with your friends and have them listen to us as well. For Amy G, I'm Celeste Gehring. Until next time, go get that gig.